talk about the Bible, shall we? So a bunch of you just got really excited. Rika's very excited. And a bunch of you just kind of slumped down in your chairs, right? Sometimes we have a love-hate relationship with this book. And sometimes we're in the middle, I get that. So it's helpful to know where you are when you start out on a journey like this. I'm gonna take a look at the most published book of all time. Where am I at with it right now? Take a moment to think about that for yourself. When I just said, let's talk about it, and your heart leapt with excitement or it came down with sadness, think about what you think about the Bible, what you think it is, what it's meant to you. Where is it in your life and what does it mean? So who's a big fan? Raise your hand proudly. How many big fans? About a quarter of us. Just taking an unscientific poll. How many of you, you don't even know where it is, you haven't dusted it off in years, if you never saw it again, you would be okay, right? A few less, okay? How many then of you are in the middle, like, it's okay, or I don't exactly know what to think about the Bible right now? Oliver's got a big hand up. Way to be honest, way to be honest. Okay, that's a lot of us. Did I miss anybody?
Well, you know, as somebody who's studied it a lot,
Yes.
you know, I'm not that, like, hyper on it.
Okay.
I'm not sad about it.
Okay.
It's a book of stories, and they can be interpreted in many ways.
Great.
And so, it's not all that negative, but it's not all
Super
that
positive.
holy thing.
Okay, so you have kind of an objective view of it. Yeah, Dut's seeing it. Anita's not seeing it as necessarily holy. She's not seeing it as awful. She's aware of what it is, and she's gonna now take over. Do the rest of the service? She could, I mean, she could.
I didn't prepare.
What's really cool about what Anita just said is because she started out by saying, I've studied it. And when you study something, you find out what it really means to you. Because I'm gonna bet that most of you learned, many of us learned what we learned about the Bible secondhand. Your priest told you, your minister told you, your parents told you, movies, Charlton Heston told you. How many of you feel like you got a lot of what you know about the Bible secondhand? You're taking it from scholars even, okay? And I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad here, but how many of you feel kind of like Anita, like, hey, I've studied this thing. No, I've read some commentaries. Right, 1, 2, 3, 4-ish, 5-ish, great. So talk to those people after church too. It is a book that it helps to study because look at what I have here in my hand. So I have this book, which is the New Oxford Annotated Bible, New Revised Standard Version with Apocrypha. Then I have this one, Holy Bible with personal commentary by Oral Roberts. How this found its way into a Unity church, we do not know. But here it is. So do you imagine that these two might have some slightly different commentaries? Yeah. This one, no offense, Oral, I'm sure you have some wonderful things to say, but this is a peer-reviewed, this is done by a group of scholars, this is done by one person. And that's just one of the many differences of the Bible. So I hold two in my hand, and we already have at least two versions, don't we? Which Bible are we talking about? The one that maybe lives in your heart, that you have on your shelf, that you hear about. So let's look a little bit more at what it really is. How many of you would say you enjoy the Bible? 3, 4, 5.
Parts of it?
Okay, parts of it, yeah.
You know, the Old Testament's a little hard to take.
Old Testament's a little hard to take. But I noticed that not everybody, went like this. Oh yeah, I really enjoy it. So So how many of us like to do things that we don't actually enjoy? So this becomes work, and I get it. I do. It can become work, and Rika is saying no. It doesn't have to be work. It can be something spiritual for us. We're all on a different place. So there's no one right answer. There's no one right Bible. This, like so many things here in Unity, you get to choose. We don't tell you what version to use, although we recommend the New Revised Standard Version, NRSV. Because do you think it makes a difference whether you're reading the King James Version that you grew up with, or this one, you know, hundreds of years later with scholarship and archaeology and linguistics and everything that we know now? It's a different, there are different insights that can come forward. And then there's the impact that you make when you read it. So you read it, and Oral Roberts reads it, and do you get two different stories sometimes? Yeah. So if Oral or anyone else is telling you what it means, what you can do is go and pick it up yourself, imagine, and read it. And say, what's actually here? And what do I enjoy and what don't I enjoy? And what am I going to make it mean in my life? What the Bible means to each of us, ultimately, is an individual decision. So if you were told a lot about the Bible, here is a trick that you can use to get started on this. And it's a phrase that I learned from Nancy Leahy Jacklow, our Unity teacher sitting in the back row back there. Wave, Nancy. She's going to be teaching next month. We'll be online. So she calls it Bible dipping. You can do this with any book, but you just open it up and see what page it turns to. I happen to turn to the last proverb. I like Proverbs. There's some cool stuff in there. Yeah, so just open it up, read a few lines, see how it feels. Put it away if that's all you need to do for that day. Just take a dip and see if something pops. You will be amazed at times, like when the daily word is exactly speaking to you that day. You may pop to something that's like, wow, did I need to hear that? Because God had helped me today. Or, man, I needed to see how that needs to be challenged, and I can see how far I've come with it. You can read some of that Old Testament stuff and see it in a new light. Now, there is a book called Remedial Christianity. I've preached from it many times. It's one of my faves, but written by a Unity minister. And I want to share with you a couple of things that he says about how to start being with, let's not say working with, how to start being with the Bible. Paul Allen Laughlin says the most important thing to know about the Bible, which you probably do not, is how excitingly diverse and inexhaustibly rich a resource it really is. There is some stuff in here I know that bothers most of us and that we may not need to turn to. So do we not turn to it for the stuff that does work for us? The trick is finding it and learning how to be with it. Because religious illiteracy means that the vast majority of people simply don't know nearly as much about their professed religion as they should. Oh, there's the should word. But Paul is saying that we blindly follow along a lot because, well, even in our, this is a lot. This is work also, you know, and again, this is the one with commentary in it. So to have even one or a group of people say, here, let me see what I could do to try to tell you, expands this. So yeah, it's a life work. People get PhDs on one book in this book. Like, you don't just get a PhD in the Bible, right? You get a PhD on the Gospel of John. And if I ask you about Corinthians, you probably don't know anything about it. That's how narrow you can go in this book and make a whole life out of it, just taking one of the books. And then finally, Paul says, The Bible is not a flawless vessel to contain God, but a window that provides glimpses of divinity despite the surface imperfections. So there are glimpses of something inspiring and good in here. What inspires you about the Bible? What passage, what character, anybody? 1 Corinthians 13. And what does it say, Rose? Basically.
It's a love chapter.
The love. Ah, there you go. The wedding one. Love is not, love is, yes. There you go. That's been spoken how many times? What characters do you take inspiration from in the Bible? Cindy.
Jeremiah 29:11. For a little plans coming up to you, says the Lord plans to prosper, not to harm you.
The Lord plans to prosper you and not to harm you. How many times have we felt like God's out to get us? But it's not that way. And we can take inspiration from that. 23rd Psalm, anybody? That's one of my favorites, the 23rd Psalm, you know. So there are these things that are inspiring and a way to look at the whole of it, the gestalt of it, to see what could it mean to me. And it means to me that, like everything that I look at, there are polarities involved here. There are things to love and there are things to struggle with. And if it's worth it for you to take an effort, and I hope that it is, because when I went to seminary, I was ready to just take this thing and like toss it aside. Like, I have to take Bible. Luckily I didn't have to take Greek and Hebrew, but had to take my Bible. Oh my gosh, am I glad I did. It rescued the Bible. I call one of my classes Rescuing the Bible. We're gonna get to that one in week 3. This is a 4-part series. So I can now be at peace with this book, even from Oral Roberts, because I understand where Oral's coming from, and I know where I'm coming from. And so yeah, I could take him on if I wanted to, because it's about what I've learned and I get to have a say. Don't let anybody else take this away from you, unless you don't want it at all, which is fine too. But you're missing out on a lot, because a lot of what happens in this world has been influenced by this. It's everywhere, it's the best-selling book. We might as well make peace with it, figure out what it means for us, and then have some fun. So, how many books are in the Bible?
Which version?
Which version? Rika? I heard an answer. I thought I had an answer from you. No? Okay.
66.
Thank you. There we go. Cindy, or Carolyn, excuse me. I heard a 66. Yes, in the book that we're talking about here, in the version that we're talking about here, we're going to go with 66. And how many, do you know how it breaks down? Old Testament, Hebrew Scriptures, Christian?
I believe 23 in New Testament.
It is 39 and 27. So let's talk about New Testament, Old Testament. Anybody know what's wrong with what I just said? No? Okay, cool. So here's the big thing that you can take away from today. If nothing else, what we try to do today to be respectful and honoring is, we call it the Hebrew Scriptures and the Christian Scriptures. Because, like, do you want the old book? Who wants the old book? I want the new book. So we did a little bit of dismissing when we named it the Old Testament and the New Testament. And now we know better, so we do better. So there are Hebrew Scriptures that we included in our Bible, okay? They don't include the Christian Scriptures in the Hebrew Bible. It doesn't go both ways. So it's to understand that the Christians, when they came forward, they brought their history with them. And they saw some good in that, and it legitimized them. So they bring it forward. So we don't have one book. We have 2 books to start with, a Hebrew Bible and a Christian Bible. And then we have 39 books and 27 books without Apocrypha. I'm not even gonna go there because your heads will hurt. So when I say to you, which book of the Bible do you like best? You got 66 of them to choose from. Mine is Ecclesiastes, because it's really grounded and gritty and and in reality, in the physical dimension as well. So how many copies of the original Bibles do you think we have? 0. So we have no original manuscripts, do we? We have copies of copies of copies of copies. And we have scribes that got involved. And because, as we know, there was no printing press, there was no computer. So, scribes, this whole thing, folks, handwritten, with no punctuation and no spaces between letters in the Hebrew Bible, right? So things could be interpreted differently. And then you know what the scribes did sometimes, bless their little hearts? They fixed things. Oh, they didn't mean to say that. Let me fix that one. There are actually copies of old manuscripts with writing in the margin, you know, kind of like a copy editor's mark. Oops. And so they fixed some things. Now, it probably doesn't substantially change important things, but it could make a difference. Think about how many Bible passages rest on one word. And if that word actually meant something different back then, in that language, in that time, how would it change it today? That's all we're saying. What Anita was talking about was having a historical critical eye for the Bible, a method of interpreting and working with the Bible. And it sounds kind of bad because it says critical. Oh, Anita is criticizing the Bible, but she's not. Well, maybe she is. Parts of it. What we are saying is there are many ways to work with this. Many, many ways. So you could work with it as pure literature. Oh, what does it say? You could work with it as a moral book. What does it tell you to act? You could look at it as history through a critical lens. Not just, I'm writing, this is the history, but what we do with history is we take all the sources that we can, because your version of something and your version of the events that happened are different, and so we have different versions. So we use this, we look at other books, we look at the history that we knew at that time, we look at the languages. It's like if we were to write a story of what's happening in the 1800s. So here we are in 2021, and I decide to write my book on, okay, so it's the 1800s, and I'm going along in my carriage with my horse, and I text my friend, LOL. Aha, something's not right here. That's what happens in here. This is happening, and then the temple fell. Well, that actually happened. So I think you're writing this probably in the period. Oh, I think this temple, here's what it was. It was kind of like, this temple's gonna fall. This temple's gonna fall. I'm telling you, in 100 years. They were writing it after the temple fell. And they were backdating it at times. And they can tell that because an LOL will pop up. And the scholars will say, see, they didn't know that then. They had to have written this later. And we look at that. When was it written? Who wrote it? And for what purpose? Go ahead.
Weren't a lot of the books left out in the Gnostic Gospels as well?
Yes.
So you got that dynamic going on as well.
Right. Right, thank you. Yeah, so there were other books that didn't make it into the canonized version. It took hundreds and hundreds of years to come up with what we now know as the Hebrew and the Christian Bible. So thank you. Yes, and there were other books that didn't make it in for different reasons, and I will talk about that next week. So now you have to come back. What we thought we knew about what happened and what we now know a little more about what happened has even changed. Scholarship changing all the time. Even things that I learned in seminary 10 years ago, we now know more. And I would do a different sermon today than I did then. Carolyn, you had your hand up. Oh, I thought you said, she was saying amen. Yeah, amen. yeah, you go. So those are a few of the things to consider. And when we look at this, sometimes people say, well, God wrote it, God said it, wrote it, I believe it, case closed. Well, which God? And we think there's one, but there's a lot of gods running around out there. Which God wrote it, and what that God write? Because I was taught that the first 5 books of the Bible were written by who? Anybody? The Torah was written by Moses. And Moses writes about his own death. Okay, so let's just say that God, so right away I'm confused. So again, God wrote it, God said. So we can look at it with the eyes that we have today and with the heart that we have today to say, what do I know about the scholarship? That's what I like. I like to read a passage, Google it, see what the scholars tell me about it. When was it written? What do well-respected liberal scholars tell me that it means? And then I'll go read what the conservative scholars say that it means. You know, well, this was Moses. That's your first clue where you are. When an author says, when Moses wrote Genesis, you go, okay. If an author says, when the J writer of Genesis wrote blank, now you know the scholarship that you're looking at. The J writer, the P writer, the priestly writer, there are writers that, at least 4 schools of writers that put together just Genesis, and so you look and you know where you're at. And of course, you can look at unity commentaries. And one of those will be used in the Mysteries of Genesis for the Christ class that Nancy is teaching. So, what's that? Mysteries of John. It's so funny. I keep saying the Mysteries of Genesis. No. Yeah, if we're going to talk about Jesus, it would help if we were in the New Testament. I'm just saying. Now, when I first started looking at the Bible, I couldn't have even told you that much. I couldn't have told you which testament, the book of John or the book of, like, it was all just one big confusing mess. And now, it makes a little more sense. So in the end, the choice is up to you. Whether you go home this week and you Bibled it, and maybe you go to Google and you even just say, what should I make of the Bible? Or what is Psalms 23 really saying? Who wrote it and why? What was going on then? The whole book of Lamentations was basically written in the historical 9/11. Like, we are suffering. We are suffering. So you could read that today through the light of what we experienced. Or you could say, I'm good over here. I got my Charles Fillmore, based everything he wrote on the Bible, but I've got my Fillmore, I've got my Deepak Chopra. I'm gonna stay over here for now, because I did that for a lot of years, and it's fine too. And I'm telling you that this can be a really fun thing to do, to just dip in, try it. You don't like it? Don't have another. But give it a try and find out if there might be a message for you that could really touch your heart, that could make a difference, that could be a touchstone or a mantra that you come back to over and over again, like, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. If I just know those 2 lines, this has given me a great gift. I hope you'll open it up and find the gift for